This is The Poet and the Poem from the Library of Congress. We're on location in Princeton, New Jersey, with Winifred Hughes, who is the winner of the Morgenthau Poetry Prize at 2024 from Passenger Journal. Winnie, what's the title of this prize-winning book, and what can you tell us about the prize?
Well, the title is The Village of New Ghosts. And the prize, the Henry Morgenthau III Prize, is for a poet publishing a first book over the age of 70.
Isn't that
So,
magnificent?
yes. And Morgenthau himself, who interestingly graduated from Princeton University, I'm here in Princeton, Henry Morgenthau III, he was a writer and publisher and producer for NPR and public TV and radio for his career. And he started writing poems in his 90s. And his first book of poetry was published at the age of 99 by Passenger Books.
You
And
know, I am just so thrilled with what you're telling us because, first of all, people need to know that this is a very competitive thing. There are dozens and dozens of entries
over
of
200,
people,
240.
240 people over 70
Over,
offered their first collection of poems. And
yes.
some of them are esteemed poets who are doing other things besides trying to get published. So, Winnie, you won and you're at the top of the heap. And today we're going to hear why, because your poems are penetrating and beautiful. And so let's just hear a poem from the prize winning book, The Village of New Ghosts.
Okay, so if there is an overarching theme to the collection, I think it is time. It's temporality. And you know, what is time? What's it like to live it and live in it as temporary creatures ourselves, because we are temporary, temporal creatures. So this poem is called Momentarily. If it goes unrecorded, will the moment be lost or more itself? Will it slip through the interstices, fade into the next as it absorbed the one before? Just a moment. Will it be longer or shorter? Will we be in it or oblivious? Will it still unite us in time, if not in place or in temper? Will it last exactly for a moment and no more, but equally no less? Is it in this spill of sunlight over newly green willows, in the glance of water over stones, in this one afternoon of nothing more, of such stillness, melting into itself and into itself, until we can't tell, but think maybe, and then it is gone.
And Winnie Hughes, that is why we need a poet, because the poet takes the moment and makes it permanent as a moment can be. And that is this poem is the definition of poetry. And that's why I'm so glad you started off with it. Now, you have two chapbooks, and they were Frost Flowers and Nine Bend Bridge, and they both were award-winning books.
Yes,
But then this is your first collection of poems.
yes.
So are these poems that you submitted to journals, or were these from the chapbooks? Are these new
Um,
poems, 2024, or what?
they are all of the above, all of the above. Some of them have appeared. Two of them appeared in Poetry Magazine.
Not a
Several,
bad gold standard.
no, not a bad place. They've appeared in various journals. Some of them, two I think came out of chapbooks. And Momentarily was in one of the chapbooks, but I felt it
Mm.
was so central that I needed it. And some of them are very new. I think about 3 or 4 of them I had literally just written when I put the manuscript in. So it's a, you know, I mean, they were literally, I had written them weeks before I put them in, and so I hadn't sent them anywhere else. But yeah, they seem to fit. I mean, it's a mysterious art to put a collection together. And you know, I worked very hard to get a certain emotional arc.
It works. There is an arc to the book, and Momentarily is a signature poem because it puts a signpost up. This is what we're working with. This is the reality, and the kind of uh, quick move, the motion of time, and everything you want to talk about really begins in this poem, which I like so much. And I wonder how long you've been writing.
Oh, all my life.
But
I've
you
always,
just said the chapbooks were just published like in
yes, yeah.
2019.
Well, to be, you know, I started out in academics, and I had an academic book published by Princeton University Press, and I taught at Princeton University for some years. But I found when my kids were little that I couldn't do that kind of research anymore. My field was Victorian fiction. I was constantly reading triple-decker novels and doing all this, you know, research in 19th century literature. And I simply couldn't do it. They were too long. So I started reading short lyric poems, and then I got into that and started writing them. So I really started when my kids were little.
Do you really think that you know the canon? Do you read contemporary poetry? Do you, what do you read? What do you think about the poetry that you choose to read?
Well, I try to read everything. I have, you know, I've taught the Norton anthology kind of poetry, and you know, I love the, you know, the sort of main classic English poets, particularly the Romantics and Victorians, because that was my field, 19th century.
Oh, yes.
But you know, I do read contemporary poetry. I belong to a group of independent scholars called Princeton Research Forum, and I lead twice a month. I lead a discussion of whatever poems we want to read, and we very often read contemporary poetry. And I will say that a poet that has spoken to me and has influenced me, and I've been interested in form as well as content, is A.R. Ammons.
Oh,
Um,
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But let's
yes.
focus on you. And so let's hear two poems together, and then we'll get a real sense of your voice. This is Winifred Hughes, who is the winner of the Morgenthau contest for the prize-winning poetry of 2024.
Okay, this poem is for my dear son Alex, the younger of my two sons, and it's called Dyslexic. I won't track the pencil in the doctor's hand or on the spread page. Look where D is tumbling into P, F and G bait each other with barbed hooks. Look what means the same, right to left, slantwise, upside, down. How did sounds get flattened, round whirled into black scratches? Jugglers dropped oranges and apples still spinning on the blank sheet, all the pith pounded out of them. I stammering for something real to look at. Hand no thing to grip. Words dance. Sith, this pot is top, but maybe tub. Tomb is moot. We might not die as palindrome. So call it spelling. Cast that spell on the misspoken ones. Some of us born that way, some headed there.
Wow, I love the way you use language as the incubus and how we begin with it and how then it will define our ending. That is so wonderful. Let's hear the next one.
This one takes off from the architecture school project of a friend's daughter, which she showed to me. It was a scale model of an opera house in Venice. So that was her project. It's called Architecture Student. Given latitude and map, she fixes Venice for her site plan, conjures up a floating opera house mid-canal, anchorless, flung against no sky, its matchbox chambers measuring a spatial music. The professor wants a story, persuasiveness of line, meta geometry, not lived in stories, cracked plaster, gutters, and plumbing. It doesn't have to hold water, just hover over the mind's grid. You have to learn, he says, how to play, how not to fasten things with bolts and mortar. Design no place to be, but to imagine being.
You know, I could hardly believe the truth of this because it is just too compassionate for that kind of learning. My daughter's an architect and she's an engineer because she's an architect. I can't imagine a teacher so good as to say, imagine the the profound beingness of something. Usually they're just so technical and so grinding. Is this actual or is this the
Yes.
poet?
Oh, yeah. This was at Princeton University. Um, and yeah, she took us around the studio, and this is what she did. And she told, I mean, I don't, I made it into poetry. But she said they were supposed to just um, come up with a kind of story and a narrative and they were to use their imagination. And
Yeah, I love that.
it was fascinating. And her
Yes,
scale
it's
model was amazing.
a very spiritual approach because we everything starts with a thought form. And then, I mean, we all know that, and then it takes material
Yeah.
shape and being. But for something as rigid as architecture, I have to say Princeton sounds like a fabulous school of architecture. And while we're on that subject, I know your poetry so well, but I still want to hear more about your academic life. What is it like in Princeton? When I graduated from high school, they didn't take women in Princeton.
Oh, of course not.
No, no, of course not.
Not
And
when
so
I graduated either.
it's sort of the dream deferred for me. But of course, I lived in Trenton, so I know your area very well.
Ah.
Tell me how you morphed into teaching there, and tell me exactly how long you taught and what you make of the students.
Oh, I got my PhD at Brown in English literature, and my field of specialization was Victorian fiction, Dickens and that lot. And I wrote a book called, that was based on my dissertation called The Maniac in the Cellar, Sensation Novels of the 1860s. So it was about these sort of proto-sensational detective novels from the 1860s, which were a huge bestseller. And they did influence Dickens. Particularly Great Expectations shows a lot of influence from the sensation novel, but it was a very controversial and very popular subgenre during the 1860s and a little bit thereafter. But anyway, nobody ever got hired from Brown, so when I went to the interview, I was pretty loose, and they hired me. And it was 1977. The first class of women had graduated 3 years before, I believe. Jane Hirschfield was in it. The poet Jane,
Yes,
was in that first
she's a
class.
tiger.
Yes, the first class that went all the way through. They had some that had been transfer students who had graduated before that, but the first class that started all together as freshmen with women in it graduated in 1974. So it was weird. It was very strange.
What were the percentage of women when you taught?
Oh, it was pretty small. I don't remember, but I do remember that we had to, if we had like a program in a different building that we weren't used to, we really the faculty had to we had to scope out where the bathrooms were. There were no ladies' rooms. You couldn't guarantee in any particular building that they had put in a ladies' room yet. So
If you had waited long enough, it would have been a unisex room
yeah.
because everything is comes
Yeah,
to
but this
that.
was 1977.
Oh dear.
And
But it was
there were no tenured women in the English department. There were very few tenured women at all. I became close friends with Nina Beberova, who taught Russian literature. She was Russian. She was an amazing character. She was the first tenured woman in the department. And I became friends later with Hilly Gertz, a really famous anthropologist who became the first woman department chair. But all of that was, and it was so different from Brown because Brown had always had Pembroke. There were always women on the campus. My mother and father met in graduate school at Brown. And my mother said that they had to take, if there was a course offered at Pembroke, a graduate student, and she was very much alone. There weren't many women there. This was in the 30s, late 30s, early 40s. And she said you had to take a course at Pembroke. So she never took Chaucer. She wanted to do it, but they offered it at Pembroke. And she
Oh,
met my father in a course called Medieval Literature Exclusive of Chaucer. So yes, that's how they met. And the professor who taught that was very young, and it was 1938 when they met. And he was still there. I actually, the first year I was in graduate school, I took a course in Chaucer with him. I took Chaucer.
wow. Well, it looks as if you landed on your feet as an esteemed academic and now as definitely a prize-winning poet. So we're going to go back to you as a poet and back to the book. So what are you going to read to us?
Um, am I reading one or two? Two?
At the Jetties.
Yeah.
Well, just one right
Just
now, and
one.
then we'll
Okay.
see.
Okay, this is another one that has time and memory. This is based on a scene that we passed all the time on the beach on Chappaquiddick at the jetties. Stone chimneys loosely piled above the dunes. All that remains of a phantom house. And I think this is the past, what it looks like now. I think I have lived in this house. I've tasted the salt air, looked out through exactly this angle of light onto this gray sea. I remember the shape of the waves. That's what memory is, the shape of waves. And when the waves recede, strange shapes of driftwood, sea wrack, sea glass, gray smoke wavering from stone chimneys after flames had engulfed the house.
Wow. Demonstrates loss. It demonstrates loss. We not only read it, we experience it. And that's why that's what the poet does. We experience it. You don't just tell us about it. And what I really am touched with this poem is how loss and the past are so inimitable. How your past, in trying to capture that vaporous thing, is so different from my attempt, and yet it is the same fruitless attempt to
Yes.
grab a hold of that and hold it for a moment. Only on the page can we do that. And so this book has so much meaning to me personally. It is about trying to make things permanent and trying to restore some dignity to what is not real anymore, which is kind of the poet's job. We talked about you teaching an academic. You call yourself a recovering academic.
Yes.
I don't know if that's an affliction or a definition, but I'm interested in your teaching nature writing. And is that Pete, you take people out on nature walks and then they write about it?
No, no. Actually, I teach at the Watershed Institute in Pennington, which is the oldest environmental group focused on clean water in New Jersey, and one of the oldest in the US. It was founded in 1949, so it's over 75 years old. And I teach for 10 years. I've taught various courses under the rubric of literature and nature.
Well, are they nature poets?
Yes, so I teach eco poets. Sometimes I go all the way back to Wordsworth, or even further back. There was one course I taught at the beginning where I sort of started with Genesis, and other times.
They're going
Last
way back.
Yes, last year I taught just things that have been published in the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of eco-poetry. The poet laureate who just finished her stint, Ada Limon, published as part of her signature project. It's an anthology of nature poetry called You Are Here. Poetry in the natural world. So I started with that, and I kept finding more and more anthologies. In some critics even say, or reviewers say, that in a sense all poetry is eco-poetry now, because we are in an ecological crisis, we're in an environmental crisis, and it's part of our experience, and it's part of everything that we are living and writing about. So yeah, that's what I'm.
That is wonderful to hear. And before we hear some more poetry, you are a birder.
Oh yes.
And so have you ever found a really rare bird that I have never seen out my kitchen window?
Probably
I mean,
not.
I would die to see a Baltimore Oriole. If I saw a Baltimore Oriole, I could die tomorrow. I've
Okay,
always wanted to.
okay.
How about
I
so?
see them all the time. I find nests. Come up to Princeton and I'll take you birding.
And that you're not. I'm closer to Baltimore. It's not fair.
I know, I know.
So what
Well,
else have you seen?
I went birding with Kendra when I was down there, and she said, "Oh, I've never seen an Oriole here." But we found a bulletin board, and it had Orioles. There were Orioles in that park. She just hadn't seen
How
them.
about a purple tanager? What do you call them?
Scarlet tanager.
Scarlet is
Yes.
well. What have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
they nest here. Listen, in the middle of Princeton, we have something called the Rogers Refuge, Charles H. Rogers Wildlife Refuge, 39-acre marsh, and it is adjacent to a 450-acre woods and fields known as the Institute for Advanced Study woods. So this is the woods where Einstein walked and thought. He loved the Institute woods. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why we were able to manage to preserve it.
it's a beautiful place where you live, but
Yes,
that
and
you value it.
in the middle of town, I have nesting marsh birds. I certainly have. I've found nests of scarlet tanagers and orioles over the years. I found 3 orioles nests this year, and yeah, it's
Well,
a
now
lot
you're
of
just
birds.
showing off.
Yeah.
So let's
Well,
go back to poetry. I'm feeling back.
okay.
We'll go
Well,
back
we're
to poetry.
perfect. We're perfect because the next one is about birds.
The perfect segue. But the thing is that I must come visit you because it is just so heartening to hear that you have such an abundance. I call them people in the trees because
Really.
they are people, they are creatures. Let's go back to poetry. This is Winifred Hughes, academic, poet, a teacher of nature, and a lover of nature. And we're going to hear about it now.
Okay. So the title of this poem comes from Emerson's journals. That is Ralph Waldo. And he thought a certain kind of bird activity that he observed could function as a kind of natural timekeeper. So this is both time and birds. And the title from Emerson's journals is A Bird While. As long as a bird will hold still, will tolerate human presence, let us in on the secret it embodies but cannot impart. Allow us a glimpse of its crest, the pattern on its throat, flick of its tail, wing bars, snatch of song, before it escapes our space, our notions of temporal sequence. That is a bird while. Just long enough, or not quite, but not a bit longer. Emerson thought it was so familiar, so much the same, that breathless interval, pause in the rhythm of flitting. It might serve as a unit of time for a natural chronometer. Do you remember that fall when a chickadee came for the seed in your hand and alighted, feather to flesh, a small scratching of claws, and everything stopped for a bird while?
Breaks my heart. I love that when you enter the poem personally and enter the landscape personally. That's so beautiful. Let's have another.
Okay, this one also is personally entering the landscape. This poem actually won a contest for a fish anthology in Ireland. Apparently, it's big there. The judge was Billy Collins, a name to conjure with. So I feel a link to Billy Collins since he picked my poem as the overall winner. And by the way, there were 3,438 entries. So
Do we have to pay you to hear the poem?
this is, well, the thing is exciting. 2 years ago, in the summer, I got to read it as part of the launch of this anthology at the West Cork Literary Festival in Bantry, Ireland. So I went to Bantry in the summer 2 years ago. So this poem is called The Scene Without. The scene is still the same. That's what you called it. The view from our back windows that opens in winter like a spread scroll. The brook that runs free and full, skidding among stones. Browned meadows with their broken stems and grasses. Matted leaf mold. Woods stripped of cover, spilling pent-up secrets. Light pallid, whether bleak or tender, only you could have told. You'd still know it instantly, how you loved the scope of it, the sheer expanse, loved even the battered, colorless stalks, the twiggy bushes, hollow seed pods, remnants of your care only last summer, no longer ago than that. Now, unbridgeable by any quickening of spring, unimaginable by any thought of mine. Only this morning, I saw a sharp-shinned hawk gliding overhead, ready to plunge. Before that, a fox, uttering its short, sharp yap, then loping across the yard to reenact the primal plot that ends in survival and abrupt extinction. Small songbirds enact it too, gorging against the cold, but not to the point of slowing their flight from the hawk. Look there. I want to show you the brown creeper camouflaged against the mottled bark until it spirals down to the base of the trunk. Golden-crowned kinglet flitting skittishly among the bare branches, picking at lichens. The flicker, with its yellow-shafted wings and dagger-like bill, drilling for grubs in the half-thawed ground. I wonder if they might be the same individual birds you saw this time last year, looking out from these same windows on this winter scene. I want to tell you that they are all still here, that I am still here, that nothing has changed, just everything inside the windows, but nothing without.
I can see why this won. I can see why this won. Not only is the heart on the page and the vulnerability, but to sustain the long poem takes a certain amount of energetic craft. And the fact that you enter each stanza a different way, how you shift the energy in your entry lines is what keeps it structured. Because just a bunch of fragmented thoughts that are beautiful wouldn't be as powerful if you hadn't laid them the way you did. And so I compliment this poem because it is truly a work of art and well worth winning among 3,000 or 5,000 and well worth a trip.
Yeah.
Before we hear a final poem, I do want to hear a word about you, your family, because you come from writers. And I guess I'm interested in that. Your parents were writers and your siblings are writers.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Tell us a little bit about that before we close the
yeah,
show.
a bunch of scribblers. Well, my parents met in graduate school. My father's parents, whom I knew well, my grandparents, neither graduated from 8th grade. but their two sons were college professors. My father wrote novels, short stories, essays, all kinds of stuff. He was a journalist before he went into academics, and he spent his career at Georgetown University. So I grew up with my father teaching at Georgetown. My mother also had a PhD. She was a pioneering role model for me. She was, a woman getting a graduate degree, a PhD in literature in 1941. It was very unusual. And she wrote a lot of poetry. Interestingly, after she was widowed she when she was in her 80s and 90s, she started writing poetry again. She had won prizes in college for poetry. And then she wrote academic stuff, but she went back to poetry, and she had several poems published when she was in her 80s and 90s.
That is so
And
heartening, isn't it?
yes, yeah. And, my sister Hildred Krill is a marvelous, marvelous poet. She's one of my role models too. And both my brothers were academic writers, professors. We had the kind of academic strain and the writing strain. One of my brothers wrote a lot of poetry, and both of them, of course, wrote academic books. So we were all scribbling away.
It's scribbling away, but we want to say something about Kendra Kapelke because she is the founder of Passenger Journal, and that must be 40 years ago,
Yes.
more maybe. And
Uh,
she had this notion that she wanted to enable older writers and give them something to live for because truly when I was young, the Yale series, for example, was just suited for poets under 40, and that
yes,
was always the tenor, always. Now
yes.
Kendra, she got the idea that we live longer than that, and our minds are, and maybe the older we are, the more we might know about language, and she started Passenger, and it has had a heralded career and has launched so many poets that we just want to send her all our love and dedicate your final poem to her.
Okay, this is the last poem in the book. It's called Album. Time pressed like a picked flower, dried and flattened to a stain of itself. Is it dross or essence? On one page, you are fishing again. On another, you are a child with a fishing pole. On the next, a father teaching his sons to fish. You are wearing the t-shirt they would later cut off you. On one page, we are together again, holding hands on the Great Wall or eloping to family court. I used to want to live the moment, in the moment. You wanted to preserve it on film, but you didn't want to pick flowers, murder to collect. There are still blank pages where I can paste in your absence. I can warp time just by flipping through. Let's live it all again. Whose hand will turn these pages in 100 years?
Yes, Winnie, let us live it all again. Let us live it all again by reading this book. This is the voice of Winifred Hughes. This is The Poet and the Poem from the Library of Congress. We're on location. The program is produced by Forest Woods Media Production, post-production by Mike Turpin, MET Studios. We wish to thank the Library of Congress for making the program possible. Funding is provided by the Sinipid Fund, by the Ravada Foundation of the Logan family, and by friends of the program, Natalie Canavore and Sandy Jackson Cohen. Mike Turpin's our engineer, and I'm Grace Cavalieri.